Good morning, and welcome to Chamber's Business Beat Speaker Series. I'm Norm Becker, Board Chair of the Greater Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining our virtual event today, the first of our 4 Business Beat events, allowing for the business community to hear directly from high-level experts and decision makers on timely and relevant topics. Today is Beat number 1, and we're talking 2021 election results. Just 2 days ago, Albuquerque voters turned out at record levels to cast their ballots for the mayor, 5 city council seats, 4 APS school board seats, and a bond proposal to build a new soccer stadium, among other things. We'll talk about the results of those races and the ballot items with the help of a pair of our political experts, recapping the outcomes and discussing what it means for our city's future. We'll also glance ahead just a bit and talk about whether this year's election results foretell anything about next year's primary or general elections. Before we get started, however, I'd like to recognize some of the great companies and organizations who are sponsoring the speaker series. Starting with P&M Resources, Senior Vice President and CFO Don Terri, New Mexico Mutual President and CEO Kelly Mixon, the University of New Mexico and its President Garnett Stokes, which includes UNM Health Sciences Center, UNM Health, UNM Comprehensive Cancer Center, UNM Athletics, and UNM Rainforest Innovation. Western Skies Community Care, Vice President Quinn Lopez. Comcast Vice President Chris Duncanson. Bank of Albuquerque, New Mexico Market CEO Jennifer Thomas, and Senior Vice President Kyle Beasley. U.S. Bank Regional President Paul DiPaolo. Central New Mexico Community College President Tracy Hartzler. Blue Cross Blue Shield New Mexico President Janice Torres, Excellent Schools New Mexico Executive Director Scott Heineman, Unirac CEO Peter Lorenz, French Funerals and Cremations President CEO Tom Antrim, Albertino Vice President Travis Cheney, U.S. Federal Credit Union President CEO Marcia Majors, Fidelity Investments Vice President of Public Affairs Leanne Kravitz, Lucenda President and CEO Joe Christian, Ultra Health CEO and President Duke Rodriguez, New Mexican Trust President and CEO Greg Leindecker, and Payday HCM President Mike Stanford. Thank you to those great sponsors' engagement and their generosity. We appreciate every one of you. So let's get going. We've got a lot of material to cover in our hour together, and I'm happy to introduce the panelists for today's events. Doctors Gabe Sanchez and Tim Krebs are joining us both from the University of New Mexico. Dr. Sanchez is a professor of political science and the founding Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Endowed Chair in Health Policy at UNM, where he directs the UNM Center for Social Policy, provides regular political commentary to state, national, and international media outlets, including the New York Times, CNN, Los Angeles Times, Economist. He's nationally recognized expert in survey research and has been on the faculty at UNM since 2005. Dr. Sanchez is a native New Mexican and a graduate of St. Pius High School here in Albuquerque. Gabe, good morning. Dr. Krebs teaches courses at American Politics with a specialization in urban politics, public policy, and campaigns and elections. He's currently the chair of UNM Political Science Department. Prior to teaching at UNM, he taught at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro, Illinois Wesleyan University. He obtained his PhD from Loyola University in Chicago in 1997. Tim, thanks for being here. As a business community, we think it's important for business leaders to be civic, and at the Chamber, we take very seriously our responsibility to work with those in government to tackle our most pressing challenges, including crime, education, and downtown transportation, name just a few of the key issues. Tim and Gabe, we're looking forward to your analysis of this year's election results and what you think they mean future. Our Chamber President, CEO Terri Cole, will kick things off with a brief recap of election results for the mayor, and then Terri and I will get your take on the race and what to expect from City Hall going forward. Terri?
Thank you, Norm, and good morning to everyone. Tim and Gabe, thanks for doing this for us. We're interested to hear what you have to say. So let's get started with our top race, which is the mayor's race. Boy, what a roller coaster ride this was. We had some competing polls would have been in a runoff, and that obviously did not happen. He came in with a whopping 56% to take the race, no runoff, and he is our next mayor. Manny Gonzalez came in, the Bernalillo County Sheriff, at 26%, and in third place was Eddie Aragon with 18%, Norm. And Keller is our next mayor for another 4 years.
All right. Thank you, Terri. And let us begin by congratulating Mayor Caroline's decisive victory. Gabe and Tim, let's get your thoughts on the outcome. Think back to a couple of months ago, and did you think that the mayor would win re-election by this convincing of a margin? And what contributed to that win?
Tim, you want to jump in first, or would you like me to?
I can jump in first. I think this has a lot to do with the power of incumbency. I think Keller Mayor Keller has the he's got the experience, he's got the time in office. He's more knowledgeable. He's learned a lot since his first election. He's intimately familiar with all of the issues. He faced a number of different headwinds, and it really was, I think, a difficult election cycle for him, despite his victory. Albuquerque is a Democratic-leaning city, so that, of course, helps him. And the opposition just wasn't. First of all, it was split in terms of sort of ideological viewpoints of the voters. I mean, it sort of split the conservative vote there. In the community, but I also think they just didn't mount a very effective opposition to him. There really wasn't a credible sort of alternative to Mayor Keller, and that's kind of what I think propelled Mayor Keller to victory.
Gabe?
Yeah, first of all, thanks Norm and Terri for having me on. I appreciate it. I think this is my first panel of any kind with the Greater Chamber. So I appreciate y'all giving me an opportunity to speak with folks this morning. Always fun to talk politics. So I'll have some points on this. I think your question was a couple months back, do we think we'd be about here? Back then, I think I pegged this at 55% Keller. So I was pretty much dead on. As a pollster, you always want to let folks know all those numbers we crunch behind the scenes, sometimes we get them right. So I was glad that I was pretty close on this one. And the point that I consistently have been making over the last couple of weeks is that this was predicated mostly for me on turnout. I thought that if we got to 25% or higher in terms of all turnout, Keller would win at least 55%, maybe even a little bit higher than that. And obviously we had, some folks will call it record turnout. I think we got to about 31%. A lot of that we'll talk about from the stadium issue. But given that Democrats, I think, have almost a 20% voter registration advantage in the greater city of Albuquerque, whenever you see turnout that high, you're going to see Democrats, generally speaking, do well on election night. And I think that was part of the story here. Other things to note, as my colleague, Professor Krebs noted, there was also pretty weak opposition. I mean, I'll be honest, when Sheriff Gonzalez announced his candidacy, I thought Mayor Keller was going to be in some trouble. He had a relatively low approval rating at that time. Crime obviously was on the front minds of voters. And when you have a moderate Democrat like the sheriff who has the ability, right, at least potential ability to cut in on a soft spot on Mayor Keller with crime, I thought this might end up being a tighter race. But it really was a campaign that never got off the ground. I think the challenges of getting public financing for the sheriff and then the ethics issues surrounding that really tripped them up. And I think in hindsight, the sheriff's campaign will say, probably given that we were able to raise a lot of money privately, we should have just done that from the onset. And as Professor Krebs noted, incumbency advantage is huge. I think what's often underestimated is experience specifically with public financing. As we've all seen in this election, it's complex and it's difficult. And obviously Keller, having already gone through that, having expertise and having a team who knew how to navigate that system quickly and effectively, I think that was a big deal. And finally, I think Eddie Aragon mounted a much stronger campaign than I thought that he would. He didn't have the resources to be able to compete to get over 50%, but I think he clearly I think, like myself, Mr. Aragon and Mayor Keller are also St. Pius products. So I don't know if there's any. One sergeant, even though he didn't intend to, helped out the other, I think, in getting over that 50% mark.
Let me ask you a question. And then we may have to move on if we run out of time. But how do you think things change at the city hall? How would you expect Mayor Keller to approach the job over the next year? Will we see him do anything differently? Gabe, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start with that one. I mean, obviously he's going to have to, because the city council is shifting. Something I think we'll bat around here before we're finished this morning. But given that, you know, he lost one of his appointees and Councilwoman Senna, that alone, right, is going to shift the makeup. And obviously we've got some runoffs, but things might shift even a little bit more conservative on the council. So I think he is going to have to do some new bargaining with the council, etc. And I think whenever you come into a race like this, and although 56% is a comfortable victory, I would not call this a landslide victory. I think he doesn't really have the bully pulpit, so to speak, to be able to come in and say, okay, the voters have spoken, I'm able to push forward with all my initiatives. I don't think this is go back to the drawing board by any means, but I'm definitely going to have to approach some things differently. And clearly, safety and public safety and homelessness were on the minds of voters. Within the next year, I would expect some pressure on him and the administration to do more public-facing things in those two areas.
Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add that, you know, remember that Mayor Keller won with, you know, over 60% of the vote, 66% of the vote, thereabouts, the last time around. So that was, you know, that was overwhelming. He's come down from that. And as my colleague Gabe pointed out, there are these changes on the city council. The city council will be emboldened to push back harder against some of the initiatives that he wants to pursue in his second term.
Thank you. Terri, did you have a follow-up question?
You know, I was interested to know what you all think about whether Manny Gonzalez just didn't gain that traction. Why did that happen?
I mean, I think he stumbled out of the gate with the financing issue and spent much of the summer dealing with those kinds of things and other distractions in his campaign.
Yeah,
it was very difficult.
Yeah, I'd agree. The campaign never really got going, and sometimes there's no nice way to say things. I don't think the sheriff performed as his potential. In the debates, he didn't perform as effectively as a lot of folks thought that he could, and I think as a consequence of that, remember, whenever voters are thinking of a second term for administration, they're essentially saying, who do I trust of these candidates to lead the city and my personal family's well-being over the next 4 years? I think Keller just projected to voters much more of a safe pick. And I think a lot of that was the sheriff just never really got his campaign going. And unfortunately, you know, given his approach late in the campaign, last debate, to go with personal unsubstantiated attacks, I really don't see a very bright political future for him. I think most voters will remember that and not think favorably about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
I would add, can I add one more thing? I think his association did not help him with Democrats. He was trying to, you know, sort of thread this needle with sort of more conservative Democrats and then coalescing with Republicans. I don't think his association with President Trump necessarily helped him with Democrats in the city to consolidate that sort of conservative, center conservative opposition.
Okay, thank you. On to the city council. Terri, talk to us about the results of the city council races.
You bet, Norm. So, as we sort of begin with the end in mind here, we've got 3 wins coming out of this election and 2 runoffs. Gabe Sanchez came in District 1 with 55% to Land Senna at 45%. You know, Land Senna her in that District 1 race, and the voters just went out, supported Luis Sanchez instead. District 3, Clarissa Pena is unopposed, so she's back in the saddle with no race whatsoever. District 5, Dan Lewis bumped off another incumbent, Cynthia Borrego, Dan Lewis coming in at 52%, and Cynthia Borrego at 40%. And our two runoff races coming around, if both of these candidates win, could change the face of our city council. So a meaningful runoff to watch for both of those candidates. District 7, Lori Robertson came in at 32%, Tammy Belcorn at 24%, and in District 9, Renaud at 43%, and Robert Grilly Jr. at 29%. So let's hear what Gabe and Tim have to say about these races.
Good. Thank you, Terry. We certainly had a slate of very consequential council races this year. And Gabe and Tim, any surprises in these results? And given your knowledge of District 7 and 9, who do you favor in the runoffs? Let's start with Tim.
I think it's always surprising when incumbents lose. And so you've got in District 1 and in District 5, you've got incumbents. Always very surprising. I think that Luis Sanchez fits that district a bit better than Lancina. He's more in the Ken Sanchez mode of city council, of being a city councilor, more moderate. He's going to be tougher on a sort of crime. He's a former police officer, going to have a more fair sort of there. So I think he fits that district a little bit better. And then Dan Lewis, of course, is a former incumbent in district, and likewise, I think he fits that. He fits the district a little bit better, but it's also, it really speaks to the value of recruiting and having strong candidates. And so, in both of these cases, I think that's reflected. As far as District 7 and District 9 are concerned, the runoffs, it's very hard to say. Runoff elections are difficult to predict because you don't know what the turnout's going to look like. But I would say that it probably favors the more progressive interests in District 7, whereas I think in District 9, it's probably going to favor more conservative interests there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll see if there's anything new. I think Professor Krebs covered a lot of great ground there. I was a bit surprised that Councilwoman Sena, not necessarily that she didn't make it over the 50% threshold, but she got beat pretty soundly. 10% in that district as an incumbent. I think my immediate reaction seeing the early vote come in on election night was that this might be a reaction to Mayor Keller. Even though he carried, I believe, every single city council district victoriously, just like he did last time around. I think a lot of us in the newsroom were saying, look, this was an appointment by Keller. And maybe, given that she's highly progressive in that district, I grew up in the district, I know that West Side district well, maybe she is a little ideologically like the mayor, a little bit too far left of center, and maybe voters were towing folks off the progressive side of things a little bit with both that race and the Borrego. So Dan Lewis coming back into the city council changes the dynamics, I think, quite a bit. I think it'll be very interesting. Other thing to think about is, given that in 7 and 9, Democrats split their vote first time around, obviously when they're consolidating around one candidate, at this point, you have to say that Democrats might have a slight advantage in those runoffs, but anything can happen in a runoff. I've always said that, right? Things are interesting. Turnout's not going to be as high as it was. And one other thing to keep in mind is Mayor Keller has got a lot of vested interest in what happens in those runoff races. I would suspect he will get directly involved in those races. I would suspect there will be a PAC, if it's not already formulated, that will pump some progressive money into those races. So all of those things considered, I would suspect Democrats to probably win in both of those races. But again, anything can happen.
Great, thank you. Terry, did you have a follow-up question to that discussion?
I am interested to see what you think was going to happen with the runoff races. Tim, did you have any comment on the runoff races?
Yeah, I do think in District 7, just based on the sort of the outgoing incumbent, the outgoing incumbent in both districts, you might predict that the race is going to just sort of follow that. So I think as far as a prediction, if you will, in District 7, I think it's going to go. It's probably leaning towards Fibecorn there. In District 9, I think it's leaning in the direction of Grout. But Professor Sanchez raised a number of great points in these races, in these runoff races, and whatever PACs get created to put money into those races and to drive turnout. And so that'll be very important. And these are relatively newer things. We typically don't have runoffs in the city council races.
Right.
And it'll be really interesting to see how this outside spending affects the race. And just, these city council races really depend a lot too on how much candidates hustle. And so we'll just have to see how it plays out.
Right. Just for everyone listening, and most people know this, but they have to hit the 50% threshold in our city council races, but not so with the APS board that we'll talk about a little later.
Thank you very much. Folks, we have to suspend our conversation for just a few minutes. Our special guest has arrived, and it's soon to be City Councilor Dan Lewis. Dan, thank you for joining us for a few minutes this morning. And first of all, let me congratulate you on your victory. I'm sure you're happy that the campaign is over. What issues are you planning to lean in on when you return to the City Council?
Thank you for having me. I mean, I'm a pro-business, pro-growth, pro-public safety type of a platform, and that's what I'm going to do. I think the makeup of this council is going to change a lot, and also just bringing accountability back to City Hall. I think that's what's going to happen, to be honest. And I mean, right now, the city has more money than we've ever had before, more revenue. I mean, some of the budgets that I dealt with 4 years ago are nowhere near the kind of revenue that we have in the city right now. So with the federal dollars, with the tax increases that Mayor Keller did, $40 million in one tax increase per year that were added to it. And yet, more money than ever before. And yet we have more homelessness than ever before, more crime than ever before. And so really what it results in is this is a leadership issue at City Hall. And I'm afraid that over the last 4 years, to be honest, there's not been a lot of accountability coming from that council. And that council is intended to be a checks and balances with the mayor, with the administration. And I don't see a lot of that. And so I think you're going to see more of that in this new council.
Great, thank you. Have you spoken to the mayor, Dan?
Last night I missed his call, and I'm going to call him back this morning. And I'll tell you this: we get along. I mean, Tim Keller and I are good friends. I mean, and I did my job when Mayor Berry was in there too. And I can tell you, as you all know, we didn't agree on him, and I was tough on him, and I'll be tough on Tim Keller. But ultimately, we're going to do what's best for the city, and I'll do my job in that way. And I'm going to lead this council. I want you guys to know too, I'm not just going to be a member on this council. I will lead this council, and we're gonna get some things done.
Dan, everywhere we've benchmarked with other cities around issues that are challenges in Albuquerque and New Mexico, whether it's education reform, downtown, the list goes on, homelessness. The key ingredient to making changes, successful changes, has been leadership. So you hit the nail on the head. It takes courage. It takes the ability to be comfortable with meaningful, responsible risk and to stick to it when the going gets rough. And you've proven time and time again that you've got those qualities. So we look forward to working with you. And if you want to comment on that for a moment, have at it.
No, thank you. I mean, I think you all know me. I mean, I spearheaded COI 25 interchange. I spearheaded when it came to things like fees on the west side, builder fees on the west side. I mean, all kinds of things that have been anti-business. In 2009, I was elected and unseated Michael Cadigan. He was the most anti-growth. Not a friend of business, not a friend of our economy. So I won that seat, and we made a lot of changes, that helped the west side to be able to grow, the city to be able to be much more of a business environment. And I worked together closely with many of you to change some of those policies and laws that made it a whole lot different. So, but I look at some of these projects and some of these things put on the back burner in the last 4 years. And so I'm looking forward to picking up on some of those infrastructure projects on the west side. They're going to be critical to economic growth. And but I'll be on the tip of the spear on those issues. And when it comes to all these crazy, ideas that come across the council that usually come from some far left, idea from outside of the country, and there's always a far left city councilor that'll carry their water every single time, whether it comes to plastic bag bans or things like that. Someone will pick it up. And so that I've been opposed and I've stand against those things that have been anti-business, and I'll do that as well. But I would like to comment on some of these other races real quick, because I tell you, if you all, when it comes to Lori Robertson and Tammy Feeblecorn, I mean, if you all are interested in supporting people that are going to support your interest, support pro-grow economy in this city, you need to make some bold stances when it comes to that race right there, because Lori and Tammy couldn't be more different, and Tammy Feeblecorn couldn't be more of an anti-growth, anti-business type of a candidate. So you got to make a decision and decide that, hey, we can make a difference in this. We're not just going to be pundits that look at it and analyze it. I mean, you need to get behind Lori Robertson. And if you really want to change the makeup of this council and really move forward, then we need to get Lori and Renee in there as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us this morning, and especially for your responsiveness to the concerns of the job creator in Albuquerque. And
thank you. And I want your members to know too that I'm always available to you. You can always get a hold of me. I want to be an advocate for you and what you're interested in. So reach out to me anytime.
Welcome back to the council, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you,
let's switch gears here and talk about the APS school board race. Terri, do you want to lead that off?
Thank you, Norm. So first off, and with 100% transparency, our organization worked very, very hard, along with Amanda Aragon's Kids Can organization, to recruit and help get elected 3 of the candidates that you see on the board. So Danielle Gonzalez won her race in District 3, and she was one of our candidates at 42%, with Jinx Baker Father at 8% and Ali Enuga at 12%. So we are very much looking forward to working with Danielle. She's got wonderful leadership skills and great experience in education. Moving on to District 5, Tapia Romero was another one of our candidates that we supported, and she was successful at 53%, a whopping 53%. Emma Jones came in at 27%, and Yuch Owery, I hope I didn't make that too bad of a disaster, at 19%. District 6, Josefina Dominguez got the win there at 55%, and Arthur Caruso at 43%. Art came in the race late, and that probably hurt him. I'd be interested to hear comments from Tim and Gabe on that. But Dominguez wins that race. And then District 7, Courtney Jackson was our 3rd candidate that we worked hard to get elected, and she came in at 48%. Julie Brennan at 42%, so Jackson wins. Overall, the chamber got involved in this because we want to see a change at APS. And at the school board level, we want to see a student-centered approach to educating our kids. So with that, Norm, I'm anxious to hear what Tim and Gabe have to say.
Great, thank you, Terri. Tim and Gabe, this is just like a real big deal of this APS races, where we had some substantial candidates, a lot of interest for the first time in a lot of elections. So we're all pretty pleased about the outcome. So looking at these business-backed and parent-backed candidates, they raised money well. By all accounts, they worked hard in their districts and ran very professional campaigns. And look like they capitalized on the increased parent engagement on education issues and the disappointment in our state's largest school district. Do I have it right? What's your take on the outcome of these races? Let's start with Gabe.
Yeah, I'll give some context first and then jump in and give a few thoughts. I think what was interesting about this school board race, right, was the consolidation of having a lot of these typically very, very low turnout elections all consolidated under the mayoral race. So obviously with that high turnout, right, it impacted everything we saw at the lower level of the ticket in terms of outcomes, right? That kind of election administration change, I think, very interesting and will give us time to reflect on what that means moving forward. But bigger picture, right, this is a national trend where you saw folks across the country vacate their seats on school boards. So this is an area where Albuquerque kind of reflected what was going on nationally. We all know adjudicating education during the pandemic, a lot of folks didn't sign up for that. And the amount of pressure, the criticism that they faced, right, the fact that people were able to recruit strong candidates on both sides speaks to how important education continues to be in the city of Albuquerque. I was impressed by that, especially given that a lot of folks were, the last thing they wanted to do was jump into being on the school board and face that level of criticism. And I think it's been said, I mean, the way this was framed going into the election was you essentially had a set of candidates that were supported by business groups. And obviously, you know, we saw 3 or 4 of those candidates come out victorious versus Democratic leaning rivals that were, you know, framed essentially, true or not, that were backed by unions. And so that was the way the campaign was really presented to voters. And there's at least a knee-jerk reaction, I think, to think about what was happening nationally and a movement away from Democrats towards Republicans. A lot of that at least perceived to be the inability of Democrats nationally to get their act together and pass legislation. And so I think there's some of that kind of filtered into these races and some of the outcomes that we saw. But at the end of the day, right, there was no incumbency advantage. And that, I think, helped the financial ability of these candidates backed by business community folks to be able to be victorious. And I think you saw that across the board.
Great, thank you. How about you, Tim?
Can't overstate, excuse me, the importance of the timing of the elections for school boards. And so that this election was consolidated with the city elections as well. It creates more interest. It creates more incentive for voters to think about these school board races and what's going on in the school board. Normally, they're extremely low turnout contests. The people that get involved as voters and as candidates have vested interest typically in what's happening in the school board. So we see the power of the teachers union is very, very strong. In previous cycles, when the election is in time with the general city election, you have administrators and then parents who've got kids in the schools. Those are the folks who typically turn out in these elections. This time it was totally different, so it created an opportunity for a different interest group, the chamber, to get involved in these election backing and recruiting candidates and perhaps helping to fund these candidates. Strong candidates matter in every election, and so candidates that were strong, that clearly helps. And just the general sort of, you know, it's hard to say that it's a sort of a right turn. I don't want to say that, but a sort of moderating turn here in the city of Albuquerque in the metro area, backed candidates for the school board.
Well, with that turn, Tim, what kind of a practical difference do you think we'll see in policy development and also personnel at the district?
Well, I think it's going to move the discussion away from the kinds of things that teachers unions typically favor. There's probably going to be more of an emphasis on approving new charters, for example. There's going to be less of an emphasis on things related to sort of COVID and the lockdown. Not to say that people are going to be, you know, reckless or anything like that, but you know, there's a lot of it was a prime moment, I think, for change on the school board coming out of this pandemic, and as happening across the country in terms of, you know, very high profile you know, schooling issues. I mean, we see a lot of discussion, especially in the state of Virginia, about the teaching of critical race theory, these kinds of things. Not that that was animating the elections here, but it got people thinking about sort of the importance of these elections, and given the pandemic and people really thinking hard about the relationship between the school system and their kids and how it impacts day-to-day life. I think that drove turnout and it drove change in these elections.
Great, Tim. Gabe, do you have any further comments?
I think it's a little early to tell what might change substantively in terms of outcomes and where they're going to focus their attention and energy. So I won't go out on a limb and make any speculations about that. But I think clearly, right, there's going to be a shift in how they think about educational outcomes, even potentially how they measure success. I would expect to see some pretty significant shifts, given that, we're not talking about like a one person to the right. I mean, this is a pretty significant turn, right? And I think you should expect to see a much different approach to how we think about things at APS. Time will tell on whether or not that will actually lead to better outcomes.
Great. Thank you, Gabe. Let's pause again for just a minute. We have a second guest joining us this morning. So let's bring her in. Crystal Tapia Romero is here. As you just heard, and you probably already knew, she won the election. Crystal, first of all, congratulations on your victory Tuesday. We're absolutely thrilled to see those that didn't follow your campaign. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and what are you hoping changes at APS as a result of the new board coming in?
Well, thank you for having me. Are you guys good? Can everyone see and hear me? Okay, fabulous. Well, first and foremost, I just need to thank everyone that elected me, because this has been a wild ride without a doubt. To be able to get in there and finally make the changes that we've been wanting to make so long, I'm excited. So I've been in education for over 20 years. My background is early childhood education, and I come from a business background as well. I'm also a small business owner, so I bring in that specific insight. And I've also had the opportunity to sit on nonprofit boards, currently sit on the early learning advisory board right now for the governor. And I've done that, probably about 4 years. And so advocacy has been something that I do. I'm a mom. My husband and I together have a 22, 18, and a 6-year-old. So we're in this, beginning, middle, and end. And I've realized that, running for school board was no easy task by far. I thought it was going to be, we're going to get in, everybody wants to help the kids, everybody loves you. Not so much. So this was something new. And, getting in there I realized we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. First and foremost, I just need to get the families to trust the district again. I need them to trust what we're going to do as a whole and keep our word and actually have the outcomes that we say we're going to have. Because everybody knows we're pouring nearly $2 billion into APS school district. That is one of the largest budgets in the entire country. And then not to even count all the money we just received, the federal money from COVID money, CARES money, things of that sort. We well exceed $2 billion when we count that. So we need to instill trust. But also, I need to be able to get in there and we have these positive outcomes. Like everybody knows, it's very common that we know we're only 30% proficient in reading, 20% proficient in math. Like if that's not red flag, major problems, then that means we need to be able to get it in there and see some positive outcomes. Because we could easily say, hey, we want our graduation rates to improve. But if we're just adjusting the bar to make sure that our students are graduating, but we're really not having the outcomes on the back end, then it's just a smoke and mirrors, type of solution. And we don't want that. We want to make sure that we are supporting our students at ground level. They're getting all the resources they need, that our teachers have the support that they need. Because in my experience in work in education, and I'm sure those of you who have children of your own, every child's different, right? Like you go and you raise your own children in your own household, you have the same parents, same environment, yet our own kids are night and day. Well, we have the same thing happening with our students in the district. We have this one size fits all, in terms of resources, the curriculum, and there's not a lot of avenues where we've been individualized as to what we're doing. And here we have to make sure and change that. And what makes them work You know, how are they learning? How do they learn best? Because obviously, you know, it's true we regressed over, you know, the past year. Some students 3 to 9 months of regression in our learning because of COVID. So on top, we were already behind. Now we regressed even further. So we have to be able to come in and play a lot of catch up. You know, right now it's going to the parents saying, you know, here's some of the ideas we have. Is it a longer school day to be able to have, you know, better outcomes? Is it going to be a longer school year, extra days added in our year? Because if we want the outcome, I need the parent support. I need the parent involvement. That's what got us to where we're at today, you know, and the reason why I can sit here, because parents really rallied behind and said, we need people where, you know, they're just as passionate as we are. And, you know, I realized that there's a lot to. I think APS has struggled with being transparent and being completely accountable for what they're doing. I don't know if any of you ever go on APS's website, but it is hard to find information on that website. You have to dig and go through other links and sometimes even send a request in an email to even get basic information as a parent. Personally, I think that's unacceptable. You know, we need to make sure that we're accountable for every single dollar, every outcome that's being placed, you know, in the classroom. Parents need to know what their children are being taught. They need to be involved. And I'm ready to get in there. I'm going to ask some hard questions, you know, but overall, we have a lot of work to do. And I'm thankful for all the support that we've had from the business community, from parents, because we realize this is a joint effort. So Norm, I'll turn it back to you. And thank you. You can see I'm very passionate.
Terri, yeah, I love your enthusiasm. It's great to see. Terri, did you have a follow-up question for Crystal before?
Yes, Crystal, congratulations. Gosh, we're just thrilled and we can hardly wait to get started working. So here's my question. Your district usually supports union candidates. In this one, they didn't. What happened?
Well, here's what I attribute it to. Again, I've been in education over 20 years. I have challenged the union in my industry 20 years. When I say challenge them, I ask questions. I am not one of these people that's just a yes person and says, just goes with the flow because you tell me to do that. And I think that's where I rubbed them wrong. Like I wasn't just gonna go in and do as I'm told, you know, and I wanted to know outcomes and results. And I haven't been able to always get that in the past. So I believe because I was someone who wasn't just gonna do what they wanted me to do, I wasn't their choice, you know, for it to be endorsed. But ultimately, we have to remember we're here for the kids. I'm here for the kids. I'm here to support them. They will come first. They've always come first in every decision that I've made. And I think if the union and I can align with that and realize that's truly who we are and what we're about, then teachers are supported, the students, the families are supported, and it's a win-win. But, you know, for me, I keep my focus straight. I can't be concerned about, you know, my opposing forces, and I just focus on what we got to do.
Well, and obviously your message resonated with the voters, and this time around they're standing behind you, so go get them. Awesome. We look forward to
Terri, and thank you guys for having me.
Here for the kids, Crystal. What an incredible message. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been our honor and pleasure to work with you and support you during the campaign, so the very best of luck to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And getting back to the ballot issues, we've got one more on the docket today. It involves soccer. Terri?
Oh boy, this is another roller coaster ride for all of us, and something that started out months ago, moving down one path and really flipped on its head. So 65 against the soccer stadium. Tim, Gabe, what do you make of that?
The people have spoken. It's pretty clear there. I think certainly, I think it's increasingly difficult in a lot of places to, you know, bond issues or successful public investment in sports and arenas and so forth. It's more difficult than it used to be. There was no sort of threat that the team would leave. I mean, oftentimes that's and elected officials. So that wasn't part of the mix here. I think that it was clear that the opponents made a very strong case about the use of bond funds for this purpose, that it wasn't a good use of money, and just the lack of clarity, the lack of specification on where the stadium would be located was something that people did not help the cause, because in an environment where uncertainty is already extremely high, to build in more there makes people generally, I think, are risk averse on these things, and it just makes them even more so in the end for this bond initiative or referendum, excuse me.
How about you, Gabe?
Yeah, I've been told by a number of folks I was pretty hard on New Mexico United on election night, breaking down why this didn't go. So I'm gonna try to temper my comments as a United fan. I'm hoping they let me in the building. But I think, as Professor Krebs noted, this just was a campaign that never really got started. It was, to be honest, just not a good campaign. And a couple of things to think about. Keep in mind, Albuquerque residents, New Mexicans overall, are very generous when it comes to bond issues. It's hard for me to think of some that don't pass. So given that, we almost pass everything when it comes to bonds, the fact that this one sticks out like a sore thumb, not only not passing, but getting hammered, is pretty telling. And a couple of points to why I think that did not happen. Krebs noted this: lack of details and specificity. When you cannot tell voters where is the stadium going to be built, all of a sudden you've got a built-in NIMBY effect, not in my backyard, right? Typically you say, okay, we're going to put it in downtown, we're going to put it in the rail yards, wherever it's going to be, and you might get a large segment of folks that vote against it because they don't want it in their backyard. In this context, essentially the full city had to worry about that. That was a major problem. You can't go into one of these things without the most basic question having an answer. Where is it going to be housed? And all those details that looked to most voters like they were making things up as it went along. You can't win a campaign any kind when you're in that type of situation. I think at $900,000 spent and this type of outcome, the other thing that becomes obvious, I always say this, timing everything in politics, and this was not the right time to put this in front of voters, right? We've got a lot of other economic challenges. We've got a lot of other things on the front minds of voters, and thinking about building a stadium right now probably did not make the most sense. And then finally, it's been a while since I studied this in terms of stadiums and the likelihood of passing, but wins and losses matter. And so unfortunately, the team didn't have their best season, didn't quite make the playoffs. All of those things, when you put it together, this thing was just not going to pass. I did not anticipate it losing this badly, but I did know early on that this probably was not going to get over the threshold.
Doesn't seem like from a long-term strategy, sustainable to play in Isotopes Park for a soccer team, and especially if you're trying to attract a women's team. So where does the city and the soccer team go from here? Gabe, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, right? They've got some options. I was reading late last night that across all minor league soccer programs are pretty much split. I think the majority operate out of minor league baseball stadiums like they have been here in Albuquerque. Another segment partner with universities, right? So partnering with UNM always made a lot of sense to me. Maybe putting some money into revitalizing UNM soccer complex always seemed to me like a wise idea. And then, build the stadium, maybe a smaller scaled down version if the funding isn't there. I would suspect United will go to the state legislature and ask them for financial support. We all know the state is flushed with more cash than usual, and there's a lot of strong supporters within the legislature for United. So I would not discount the prospect of being able to make that happen. But again, maybe now is not the right time for that. I would expect probably staying with the Isotopes for at least the short-term period while they try to figure out what other funding streams might be available to build the stadium. Final thing I'll say is, I don't want to overinterpret the results of this. To me, this does not send a signal that City of Albuquerque residents do not want a stadium. They just do not think this should be funded through this bond package.
Great. Thank you, Gabe. Tim, did you want to add anything else before we move on?
I would agree with what Gabe said, and there's always an emotional component to these kinds of things because the fan attachment is very important. I think with some more time and, as Gabe said, more wins, and more clarity on these things, I think it could be successful. I tend to be somebody who likes sort of these big kinds of projects. I'm a huge sports fan myself. So I certainly personally would like to see something like this. And they'll regroup and they'll try to figure out maybe with the legislature and use some, if they get support there, use that to maybe raise private capital to build a stadium. And so, they, at the moment at least, they don't have a sort of credible alternative as to where they're going to be. So that threat of exit is not, at the moment, is not there. And so that's, I think, an important thing to remember.
Great, thank you, Tim. All right, let's look forward now. Now that this election is behind us, to the next election. You can see on the screen for election next year, as well as the state house, half the public education commission, some judgeships, county level races, etc. Is there anything that the two of our experts see from the outcome of the local races this year that would foreshadow what might happen in next year's campaigns? Tim, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. It's really difficult, to extrapolate from these, odd numbered year elections, these local elections, to what's going to happen in 2022. There's, of course, media love to do this, love to talk about this. What does it mean for the midterm elections? I think the statewide races in Virginia and New Jersey are a little bit more helpful in terms of thinking about races for the U.S. House, for example, and for the Senate, in large part because those are partisan races, and they're more ideologically infused, and so it's a little bit easier to go from that to thinking about, the races for the U.S. Congress. The president matters a great deal, and so if President Biden is going to be in the high 30s, mid 40s, it's going to make it a difficult environment for Governor Lujan Grisham. But a lot too will depend on the opposition and the quality of that opposition, and sort of the direction of the state overall as we kind of continue to emerge from the pandemic, and as the economy improves a bit as we emerge from the pandemic. And we don't know yet what's going to happen with respect to infrastructure and the large packages that are being considered at the national level. We don't know what's going to happen there and how that's going to affect things in our state or in our nation as a whole, and how it affects certainly the perception, because a lot of that's, if it's infrastructure based, a lot of that's going to be a while to get through the pipeline in terms of projects. And so in any midterm election, you usually have something of a shift away from the president's party. And so that could potentially affect some of these down ballot races.
Great, Gabe?
Yeah, I'll add a bit. I'll start with thinking about the mayoral race and what to think about in the future. Quick points on that. Second terms haven't been kind to New Mexicans in high-level office. You could Martinez, Berry, etc. It kind of seems like the wheels fall off in the second term. Keller said all along he's going to be an exception to that rule. I hope for the betterment of the city of Albuquerque that he is, but I will pay close attention. He's got a more difficult, challenging road ahead with the change in the city council. Again, second terms, I always say, be careful what you wish for in politics. And second terms have not been kind to folks. So let's pay attention to what happens there. For the races in 2022, I'll spend less time talking about federal races because the elephant in the room is redistricting. Until we see what those districts look like, I ain't going to go out on a limb and say a whole lot. That changes the whole nature of how we think about those things. But the tailwinds are definitely going to be with Republicans. Even if you take out what happened in Virginia, and we take out, whether these are barometer races across the country, as Professor Krebs noted, there's always a swing back towards the other party after a presidential. And as long as Democrats can't get it together, work together, get some stuff passed, they're going to pay for that. And I think, unfortunately for Democrats, that's looking like what the horizon is going to look like. Whether or not that will filter down into our U.S. houses to be determined. Where I do know it will have an impact is on the governor's race. I would expect this to be a lot tighter race than I would have predicted a year ago. And not only do you have those tailwinds moving against Democrats, but I think as soon as Mr. Ronchetti threw his hat in the ring, he immediately, to me, was the person I would say front runner for the Republican primary. And so if it's really a race of Ronchetti versus incumbent Lujan Grisham, that's going to be a tight race. I'll tell you that right now. That'll be a race decided by 5 percentage points, in my opinion. I've already been tracking this and paying attention to this one. And I think if it's a nationalized race, which I suspect it probably will be, where Lujan Grisham is tied to Biden, and you think about tying Ronchetti to Trump, things are going to get really interesting. I would expect this to be a record-breaking campaign spending for a governor's race by a wide margin in the next upcoming.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, that'll do it for our Business Beat event this morning. I want to thank again our expert panelists, Dr. Tim Krebs and Dr. Gabe Sanchez. Thank you so much. You were excellent this morning.
Thank you both.
Your
Thank
insight,
you.
your insight analysis of the election results have been outstanding. And I think I speak for everybody who can't say a thing because we got them all muted when I say that we really enjoyed understanding more about what this year's election means for us now and in the future. At this time, I'd like to introduce Chris Duncanson, Comcast Vice President, to wrap up our meeting today. Chris has been with Comcast for nearly 30 years now, and we're very fortunate to have him on our chamber board. Chris?
Thank you, Norm. On behalf of the chamber, we would once again like to thank these great sponsors of our Business Beats series. We got PNM, UNM, New Mexico Mutual, French Funerals and Cremations, UNIRAC, Western Sky Community Care, Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Mexico, Comcast, Albertsons, Excellent Schools New Mexico, Bank of Albuquerque, Fidelity Investments, U.S. Eagle Credit Union, Nucenda Credit Union, New Mexico Bank and Trust, Payday HCM, U.S. Bank, CNM, and Ultra Health. Given all those sponsors, you can see the interest in our content today. I hope everyone enjoyed today's event as much as I did. I think it's important for local businesses and their employees to understand and engage in the electoral process. Elections are often messy and contentious, but they are the way in which we contend for the future of our community. Elections set a course and direction. They do matter. And just as important, when the dust is settled from a fight, it's incumbent upon all of us as civic leaders to support and work together with those who are elected for the betterment of our city. If my time on the chamber board has shown me anything, it's that the business community has a lot to contribute to the process of addressing the major challenges we face. We should always take the opportunity to be part of making our city and our area better. We want to thank everyone for attending today's first installment of the 2021-22 Business Beat Speaker Series. Our next event in the series will feature LFC Director David Abbey on December 8th at 3 p.m. Between now and then, however, we hope to see you in person next week for the Chamber's 4th annual Crime Stat Briefing, where District Attorney Raul Torres will talk about our community's latest crime trends and the various policy changes that he and the Chamber have been working on together to shut the revolving door and make it easier to fight crime going forward. You won't want to miss this, so please RSVP today. And if you can't make it in person, please join our video feed of the event on the link on your screens. And that concludes our event for today. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you soon.